Alabama seemed to get back on track yesterday against Mississippi State, but can they keep it up today against Missouri?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Jimmy, yesterday, Alabama got back on the winning track after the setback against Texas A&M in the final Saturday, and they looked pretty doggone good doing it. And I was there in the middle of it. What'd you think from afar?
Rough day. Softball team lost to Texas. Baseball team finally lost their first game to Columbia. The gymnastics team beat Boise State, but with one of their lowest scores of the year. They didn't flip well last night. So I'm glad the basketball team won because that was sort of a rough Alabama day. Those don't happen very often. But I was thrilled that once again, I thought the game was sort of almost like two different games. There was the part of the game where Alabama looked like their old SEC championship team selves. There was part of the game where you felt like, man, this team really is good. They are nearly invincible for a college basketball team. They are really good. And then there's stretches where they just cannot score. And there's too many players that still aren't scoring well. Mark Sears, Rylan Griffin, they're not scoring. Bediako's never really been a scorer, although he was yesterday. I mean, our second leading – we played great, yet our second leading scorer had just 11 points. It was a weird game in that sense to me that, we played – part of the game we played great, and that's why we won. And part of the team we played, barely enough well to win on a bad shooting day. I thought that was kind of both efforts. But, Mississippi State's pretty good. They're athletic. Tolu Smith is a good player. I know they're an NCAA tournament team. Let's not forget that. I mean, we're not in the NCAA tournament yet, but we're playing NCAA tournament teams. And Mississippi State is an NCAA tournament team. They either barely get in or they barely don't. But they have a resume to get in many, if not most years. So that was a good team, and it was a good win, and it was an easy win. I mean, we didn't have to, struggle at the end.
There was a mild bit of concern at the end. Mississippi State started making a comeback. I think they cut it to 14, and it was one of those where, okay, we can see if like a miracle situation happens and they hit a few threes. But then I thought to myself, this Mississippi State team hadn't hit a three practically all day. They're not a good shooting squad. They don't have very good guard play. They don't do well. The guards don't when they're pressured. Tolu Smith is their best player, and he's very good. Jeffries is good. I thought there were some nice moments for Keyshawn Murphy out of Ramsey in Birmingham. But overall, this is just not a team that should be hanging with Alabama in a moment like this. And you say, well, why didn't Alabama beat them this badly in Tuscaloosa when they played? Probably because at the time, Alabama was still trying to find itself a little bit. And when you're in the heat of the SEC grind on a regular season, it can wear on you, and anybody can really get you if you're not really focused in on the contest at that moment. Also, maybe some of the other Alabama players were thinking like I was, like, hey, there's a Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock concert. Why didn't I go to that? Which is what I did that night. But anyway, also want to give a shout out to whoever it was. There were two of them. One of them actually came up to me and spoke to me with his brother. And God help me, I'd love to remember his name. I have no idea what his name is, but he came up to me, said he listens to the podcast. We do a great job, and I appreciate that. It makes it sound like I'm making that accolade up when I do it like that. I don't know who it was, and I can't describe him, but he said we were awesome and deserve a raise, Jimmy.
Yeah, you're like Jan Brady. His name is I have a new boyfriend. His name is Bill Glass.
His name is Guy Incognito. And anyway, yeah, it was very nice of him to come up and speak to me. My kids and I got a picture with the one and only Paul Feinbaum, and this is no joke. Each one of them, when they left, said, "Who the hell was that guy?" And I told them, I said, "He's a very famous sports personality," and they all looked back like, "Are you talking about the same guy we're talking about?" So maybe his reach isn't quite as far as I thought it was. We also
Frankly,
got
the show's doing so well, Luke. I saw that picture, and my first thought was, I'm like, we finally made it. Paul Feinbaum stopped Luke Robinson and asked him if he could get a picture with Luke.
That's true. And we also got my kids were much more excited. They got a picture with the Bush's Baked Bean dog mascot.
They're more excited about that than the picture with Paul.
They were. And the other thing that was funny about that, they kept saying, like, Bush's Baked Beans, the official baked beans of the SEC. And I was like, well, you know damn good and well I ain't eating no unofficial baked beans in the SEC. Like, who's going to have some contraband baked beans in there?
I'll be completely honest. I'm a little unfamiliar with the product until they got associated with the SEC, and I'm actually curious to eat them simply because of the associate. I'm like, I'm going to eat that one day.
Well, they got a lot of flavors, and let me also say this: I don't know who was more tired of being hugged and petted, Paul Feinbaum or the dog. But at least the dog got treats. Like, after every third group left, the dog would look up at like the trainer and be like, how many more of these people I got to go? Because I see a long line here. There was a long line. And I don't think they have several golden retrievers. I think there's only one of them. There might be multiple Paul Feinbaums.
And after every third family Feinbaum met, they didn't give him a steak or something?
I mean, no, you'd have to give him like a protein shake or something. Man, he is so small.
Yeah, he is. He's
I'll show you.
I've met Paul a few times. He's not big.
I tried this. Well, you and I have a friend who is over at the University of Mississippi that knows Paul Feinbaum. I tried to drop his name, and I couldn't tell if he knew it or if Paul was just so glassy-eyed he was like, yeah, okay, sounds great. Because I said, I met you in a skybox at the SEC championship game like 15 years ago. Remember that with this guy and this? He was like, yeah, I totally remember that. Can we please take this picture so I can quit nodding and then do this with the next person? Anyway,
he knows that guy. I met Paul with that guy at an event, and they talked for 30 minutes. They're pals, but I think that's a long day for Paul. I mean, that seems to me that would be a long day for Paul.
It's a long day, and I'm going to put that picture up here in a second because we're still in Nashville, me and my children, and we're going to go to the game. And thankfully, we're going to talk about the SEC tournament today in the next segment. But thankfully, Kentucky and Tennessee lost, because I bought a ticket for yesterday and I bought crap tickets and we just moved up, right? Well, last night I was looking at tickets. This is before the Tennessee game was over and Kentucky hadn't played, and there's blue and orange everywhere. And I said, okay, I looked at the tickets, and the cheapest I could see, like in terrible seats, were like $115 a piece. Well, you got 4 kids, and then you add on the fees and the taxes, and all of a sudden it gets to be, big money for crap tickets. So I said, okay, let me just see if Tennessee or Kentucky loses, the prices will drop. I woke up this morning because there was no way on God's green earth I was staying up till the Kentucky game ended. And ironically, our hotel doesn't have the SEC network for some reason.
Good Lord. In Nashville.
I know. So then I woke up this morning at like 4:30 because that's what I do, and I'll check the ticket prices. $27 to get me into the gate today, Jimmy.
$27.
Well, I mean, they tack on a few fees and whatever, but in the end,
does that get you into today's game or today and tomorrow?
That gets me into today and both games today. I can't go tomorrow because the kids got to fly out and I'm going to be driving home.
The tickets are per session. They're not
per session.
Per session.
Yeah, but I get 2 games today for a grand total of $160 after all the fees and everything, and that would have been 1 ticket if I had bought yesterday. So,
wow,
this
is what happens when
it's genius.
Probably the plan, the budget plan for attending the SEC tournament is to stay home and get packed and watch your TV and wait for Kentucky to lose.
That's it.
And when Kentucky loses, you have a cheap trip to Nashville.
Exactly.
They're probably all canceling their hotel rooms. Call the hotel after they all leave town, and anyway.
Maybe I'll get a hotel that's got SEC network now.
Yeah, sometimes I tell people, describe our podcast as really what it is me and Luke just talking on the phone like we would any other time about Alabama, and we just happen to hit record. That's literally what we're doing right now.
That is really what we're doing. It's got to be riveting. Jimmy, and let me tell everybody about FanDuel. We're at the midway point of the NBA season. It's here, and it's now, and it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, and it's easy to use. Then you can bet on anything you want to, from the money line to point scores to threes drained or whatever. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine bets for an even bigger chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and the NFL. And, Jimmy, yesterday I happened to win a little bit of flash myself when it comes to the Alabama Crimson Tide on the basketball courts. And, so that was good. Let's talk a little bit about the remaining tournament here. So by the time a lot of people watch this, it's probably over, but it doesn't matter. We'll still make it fun. Alabama against Missouri today. That's a fun game. I mean, if you ask me, I think it is. Kobe Brown has played as well as anybody has played in the tournament to date yesterday. Yeah. He was dominating, and he's from Huntsville. I kind of was hoping he would be one of those guys that would hop in the transfer portal last year, or if he's so inclined and he wants to come to the University of Alabama next year, I would love to see him at the University of Alabama next year. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would love to see it. And then, so that's going to be a fun game. And Missouri is one of the few teams that's putting up points on Tennessee even. So maybe today we see a lot of points. I would like to see that. And then, of course, tonight or this afternoon, you got A&M and Vanderbilt in a bit of a surprise matchup. Did you see Eric Musselman's henchman or goon throw down the phone of a Kentucky student reporter? And, I mean, what the heck is that, man? I mean, why is Musselman always pissed?
I've said it before. I can't, as an Alabama guy, it's crazy to say this out loud, but I mean, I like Bruce Pearl more than I like Eric Musselman. And that's a good example.
Yeah.
As to why. I mean, because if you told me before the tournament started that a team would lose and the head coach would stomp off the court super angry with one of his assistants destroying a Kentucky student's $600 iPhone, I would be like, oh, probably Musselman. You know, I mean, it's on brand, that he acts like that. And that's why I'm like, hey, if I got an extra seat at my dinner table and I can only invite one of the two, I'm inviting Bruce every time. I don't need Musselman tearing up my dinner.
Busting salt shakers and throwing sweet and low packets all over the place if his steak is cooked medium versus medium rare. I mean, that just seems like, and also I guess he had to get one of his goons to reach up there and get the phone because he was too short to get it. I had this like mental image of him just jumping up, trying to, like, the students like, oh, you can't get it. Remember that guy with the fishing pole trying to do the discount on Aflac or whatever it was?
It was like a scene from the Spy Who Shagged Me, but Musselman's assistant, he's Dr. Evil, and the head coach is Vern Troyer.
There you go. But so I think this is heading towards Bama A&M in the final, which, I mean, let's give the people what they want. I mean, I think these are the two best teams clearly. I wouldn't mind it being Vanderbilt, because I think if Vanderbilt wins this game, they got a puncher's chance to get in. Now, obviously, if they were to win in the final, they would get in. But I'm saying, let's say Alabama gets to the final and then Vandy upsets A&M. I think Vandy's got a really good case. Now, boy, I don't know if they can pull the trigger on it, because they have some bad losses. I think they lost to Grambling. They lost to LSU when LSU was just as bad as they could be.
They lost to Alabama by 54.
They did lose to us by 54. That'll hang, that one sort of hangs in there like a bad piece of chicken in between the teeth. I mean, it just stays in there. You can't get rid of it.
I heard Lenardi. Yeah, I heard Lenardi this morning on Marty and McGee, Joe Lenardi, Joey Brackets. And they were asking about the case for Vanderbilt, and Lenardi made a great point. He said, I think all three of us think Vanderbilt's good enough to be in this tournament, that they're an NCAA tournament team. I think any basketball expert that watches them play right now goes, that's an NCAA tournament team. But the fact of the matter is, no team with a net in the 80s has ever made the tournament as an at-large. And he said, my advice to Vanderbilt would be to win today and then win tomorrow, because history says with their net, they're not getting in. And here's my response to that is this is the third or fourth time this year that something has happened with the net where I'm like, they need to take a look at the net. I'm not sure that the net is all it's cracked up to be. It's supposed to be an improvement over the RPI, but I've seen examples of like, someone needs to explain this to me. And the Vanderbilt situation is one of those where not only are they passing the eyeball test, they're beating one ranked team after another. And I know they have some bad losses early, but so does Texas A&M.
If they beat A&M, first of all, I would assume their net would go up, but frankly, I don't know, because I think we're overthinking this. Maybe we just don't need a net or an RPI. Maybe we just need to say, okay, here's your resume. Here's who you've beaten, and here's their records. And
Right.
and here's how you've looked throughout the year. And just look at that. And I'm tired of trying to give, we do all this net and RPI stuff, it seems to me, so that we can get some of those lesser thans in, because they can say, well, we played really hard and we're really good. I would much rather have Vanderbilt coached by Jerry Stackhouse in the tournament than, UNC Greensboro, or give me somebody else like that. I'm like that. I would rather have the Power Five. I defer to the Power.
Every attempt to quantify a resume in basketball or football, it doesn't always seem to work perfectly. I mean, in football last year, even Alabama fans were upset at the team. We don't deserve to be in the playoff. A lot of the analytics very clearly stated Alabama was among the top 4 teams. That was the analytics. That was the computers, the attempts to quantify the resume. They were all saying Alabama should be in the top 4. And now that we played through the bowl games and the playoffs, you look back on it, now it's a pretty easy case to make that Alabama was one of the best 4 teams. So maybe I'm not doing the net and the RPI a service when I say it doesn't appear right. Maybe I should trust it more. But I just hope that the powers that be take another look at net, and maybe the algorithm needs to be messed with a little bit, because Vanderbilt shouldn't be in the 80s. I mean, it shouldn't be in the 80s.
They're in the 80s. Auburn's like number 32. And the only reason I'm not picking on Auburn, I'm just saying that's the only one I've known about because I've heard other Auburn people talk about it, and they're like, we should be safely in. And I keep going, but why should you be safely in? Auburn hadn't beaten much of anybody. I mean, they got swept by A&M. They got swept by Alabama. They got blown out by Kentucky. They beat Arkansas early in the year without Nick Smith, and then Nick Smith and Arkansas beat them in the tournament in a game that a lot of people thought, okay, this could really solidify Auburn. They lost to Tennessee on the road. They beat them at home without Zakai Ziegler, and it was still pretty close for a while. Vanderbilt beat them.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's funny to stand here and say Auburn is in the NCAA tournament and Vanderbilt has to beat Texas A&M and Alabama.
Yeah.
And I'm like, isn't Vanderbilt better than Auburn?
Is Vandy's – see, that's where we should all question the net. If Vandy's net is 50 points worse than Auburn's, and Vandy has beaten Auburn and has at least a comparable record, and by the way, Vandy beat Kentucky twice this year.
That's right.
Then how is that possible? Somebody ought to go, okay, maybe the net's the problem.
I know this. If Alabama was playing Auburn or Vanderbilt today in the SEC tournament semifinals, I wouldn't consider one tougher than the other.
Agreed.
I mean, I would worry because I'm an Alabama fan and it's Auburn, right? But I'm not so sure that Vanderbilt's not just the better team. And they're going to be in the NIT. Auburn's in the big one.
They beat Kentucky yesterday without arguably their best player. I've heard announcer after announcer, not just one, not just Jimmy Dykes, announcer after announcer say Vanderbilt runs really awesome offensive sets all the time, like maybe some of the best in the country. So again, if you want to make the argument, okay, Vandy shouldn't be in because they lost their best player too, and maybe they're not as much of a threat or whatever. Okay, then you better dock Tennessee because they lost their point guard. I would dock them several spots. Tennessee obviously is going to get in. I'm also not making the argument for Auburn not to get in. I think Auburn should probably be in, but I think Vanderbilt probably should be too. But we'll see. I mean, maybe they win the whole thing and they do it. But I was anti-Vanderbilt until they beat Kentucky yesterday, and I saw how many Kentucky people are here. I mean, beating Kentucky in Rupp is one thing when they're sort of just, going through the motions of the regular season like they were this year. Beating them in tournament time when they've had an extra day of rest, that's kind of a thing. Anyway, Jimmy, let's take a break. We want to talk about the Bears trading that number 1 pick when we come back. And we're back. All right. So, Jimmy, the Bears have traded the number 1 pick to the Carolina Panthers, and it feels like they're going to go for CJ Stroud now, which, I mean, look, it's terrible and it's great because I don't want Bryce Young in Carolina. I don't think that's a great organization. I don't think it's a good place for him. They don't have any weapons, and whoever they put there is going to have a rough go at it. If you ask me, they've got nobody to throw to. They just traded DJ Moore to the Bears as a part of this. Honest to God, I don't know a receiver on their team. They might call Steve Smith and say, hey, bro, what you doing? They need somebody back. They don't have Christian McCaffrey anymore. Boy, I just feel like Bryce Young will be dodging a bullet, but I hate it because Bryce Young won't be going first. That's my initial take. Maybe they change their minds. Maybe they take him first. And if they do, I'll cheer for him. I'll reluctantly be a Panthers fan, but I feel like they're going after CJ Stroud.
There's a lot of misinformation in the draft, purposeful. I mean, I think front offices come up with creative ways to leak untrue information to gain an advantage in the draft. So while I agree, I mean, just look at the Vegas boards that now have CJ Stroud as the favorite to go number 1, where Bryce was the favorite before the trade, which is funny. I mean, before the trade, the Bears are picking number 1. They're not taking a quarterback, and Bryce is the favorite to go number 1. Then the Panthers trade up to get the number 1 pick, and they're definitely taking a quarterback, and now CJ Stroud's number 1. That's kind of funny. I'm not, I saw a mock this morning that had Anthony Richardson going number 1 to the Panthers. I'm not convinced. This is my thinking. I tend just logically, I don't think the Panthers have made up their mind. If they are, they're dumber than I thought. There's still evaluation. Neither CJ Stroud nor Bryce hasn't thrown yet. Bryce didn't throw at the combine because he's waiting to do all his stuff at pro day, and they've already made their decision. I'm just saying, and I'm not arguing. I'm just pointing out that here's just my thought. I doubt they've made up their mind completely. Now, there might be a lean. There might be boy, we really like Stroud, and who can blame him? I like Stroud too. I think he's going to be really good. I felt CJ Stroud was sort of getting disrespected through the process, frankly, but I don't think the Panthers are going to make up their mind until they've come to Tuscaloosa on March 23rd to watch Bryce at his pro day, watch CJ Stroud. Then they do individual private workouts with them that no one ever sees. And then they go to dinner with them and their families, and they get to know them. That happens, and none of that is yet to happen. So my thinking is this. They might be a lean to Stroud. I doubt that as an organization they've made up their mind. If so, why not start negotiating with them tomorrow? You don't have to wait till the draft to sign your pick. They'd start negotiating tomorrow if their mind is made up. So I bet it's not. I bet they're still thinking it through. But if Stroud goes to the Panthers and Bryce goes number 2 to the Texans, my feelings won't be hurt. I would almost rather be a fan of the Houston Texans because of D'Amico, because of John Mechie, because of Christian Harris, our guys that are in Houston already.
Yeah, and I think that Houston may be the inadvertent winner here, especially if the Panthers go CJ Stroud. They didn't have to trade up. They still get the guy they want, and no harm, no foul for them. And they pay him a little less. I mean, a tiny bit less. I mean, I think teams even like it when they get pick number 1 and they get the, the cachet of this. But please, 9-pound, 7-ounce baby Jesus, let the Panthers select Anthony Richardson number 1. Because as a podcaster and a guy who works in sports during the offseason, I need stuff to talk about occasionally. If Anthony Richardson goes number 1, I'll never run out of stuff to talk about ever again.
Leave it to the even-keeled guy. You know what? When I read, that's funny. And I've seen a lot of Anthony Richardson reaction. And I've also seen a lot of Anthony Richardson stock zoom through the roof with NFL teams that I actually believe is a real thing. I think everybody's being a little nuts. I think the NFL teams that are sky high on a guy that had a QBR rating of less than Brady Cook's at Missouri last year, and now you're talking about him being the number 1 pick in the draft, I think is insane. At the same time, the fans that think it's a total joke that Anthony Richardson has no chance to be a great quarterback, I completely disagree with that. I mean, someone with this physical skills has a chance to be one of the greats, or certainly has a chance. So I think there's too much negativity and too much through the roof positivity at the same time. I think people need to chill a little bit on Richardson and take a smarter
I'm
look.
with you. I'm with you. But he's kind of like Dogecoin or something. I mean, you're like, what is this? This is weird. It's just a cryptocurrency with a picture of a dog on it that was looking weird in a meme one time. Oh my God, it's worth $8 gazillion for every one of these Dogecoins. And then the next day you're like, oh, it's worth 10 cents again. I mean, it's wild how the truth is kind of in the middle, but I'm leaning towards the truth is closer to the 10 cents than the 90 gazillion. Because how many times have we seen quarterbacks who can run real fast and throw real far and throw it real hard and are mean and strong and all this, but they don't win Super Bowls? I mean, you got Drew Brees wasn't going to set any raised athletic, of course, because he's playing in the NFL. Everybody in the NFL is athletic. I don't care. You can make fun of them or whatever if you want to, but they're all athletic. Peyton Manning, I mean, he's sort of statuesque back there. I mean, he's just like, but he knows where to throw it. He knows what to do. It's a lot up here. And that's where, to me, this is a Bryce Young literal no-brainer, but whatever. And I'm not hating on Anthony Richardson. I think he's a wonderful athlete. I think if you draft him number one, you ought to drug test the front office. That'll be a first.
Well, the Colts, to me, the onus now is on the Colts for draft talk is.
Oh, they're screwed.
I think Panthers take Stroud or Bryce. Then the Texans take Bryce or Stroud. Then you got the Cardinals who have no interest in taking a quarterback. They're either going to trade that pick or stick right where they are and take Will Anderson at 3. Then the Colts, who need a quarterback, are sitting there at 4. Do they gamble on Anthony Richardson at 4, or do they prefer Will Levis? Or do they go, we totally screwed this up by not moving up, and we are not about to draft Richardson or Levis just because they're next, because we don't believe in either one of them. Or maybe they do. Maybe they love Richardson or Levis. I just think now all of a sudden the Colts' opinion about a quarterback at 4 becomes super interesting.
Yeah, I think now if I'm the Colts, and again, I don't know the NFL as well as college game. If I'm the Colts, I look at it like this is a golden opportunity for me to trade with a team that has fallen in love with Richardson or Levis, assuming one of them is there and Richardson didn't go first. If Richardson does go first, then I think the Colts are fine. They get Stroud or Bryce. I think they're fine as long as somebody can take that Arizona spot. They're fine. And I think they sit tight. But if Bryce and Stroud go combination 1-2, I'm with you on the Colts. They got to do something else, because I would rather be bad again for one more year. Draft a dude that can help my quarterback the next year in the draft and then be okay. Or do like the Bears did. I think the Bears fleeced the Carolina Panthers. I mean, they get a first round this year. They get a first round next year. They get a second round, I think, this year, and they get DJ Moore. That's bananas talk. I mean, that's a lot of picks.
And they're probably going to take a left tackle from Northwestern at number 9, a hometown kid from Northwestern at number 9 is a left tackle. Now you've made Justin Fields better. So, exactly. Yeah, I do like what the Bears have done here for sure. I think they did get plenty for that first pick, and they're still picking at 9, and they get all these extra picks. And now they've made Justin Fields better. You take the Northwestern tackle at 9. You've added DJ Moore wide. Maybe taking a good back on day 2 or day 3. I mean, boy, they've really helped Justin Fields. And as we saw with Tua this year in Miami, Luke, the quarterback can look bad if he's got a bad cast around him. You put a good cast around him, and now he's going to look pretty good. And I think the Bears are doing that slowly but surely with Fields.
All right, that's going to do it for today, buddy. I got to get this done so I can put it out before the next game, or else no reason for anybody to watch it, I don't guess, unless they just like us. Anywho, roll Tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.